Hello, welcome back to Recipe Calculations. This is the PowerPoint that we had in class today. I just thought I'd do a quick voiceover in case you guys needed a brief reintroduction to everything. So I'm going to kind of just glaze over these first couple of slides since it's just our introduction information. So yeah, just remember it's a dense section, so don't feel bad if it comes off a bit confusing. There's a lot of acronyms. At the end of this, there's that list I was talking about that has a breakdown of all the acronyms. And just know in the end, we are only doing addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And what complicates this is sorting through the information in a specific scenario or the question that you're working through on a math quiz. And then also converting between units of measure can be a little complicated. But don't get too hung up on the details. Just try to find your own understanding of the concepts and know that some calculations are applicable to regular daily life, so they're going to be a little bit easier. And then some are typically only used in the culinary industry, and those will be a little bit more challenging. So we're going to learn how to increase or decrease the recipe yield. We will also learn how to adjust the portion sizes and total yields. And we're going to discover unit price when buying in bulk, yield percentage, and edible portion cost. So we talked about the metric system, super easy, what it looks like in the culinary world, and then just make sure you get that scale. That's what's going to help you with that. Okay, so our practical applications, we went over this quite a bit in class today. This is like the most basic equation that we have for this lesson. So this is taking our original yield and either increasing it or decreasing it for our new yield. So what we do here is just plug in those numbers, and that gives us our conversion factor. You might also see conversion factor written as RCF, and that just means recipe conversion factor. Just know those two terms are literally exactly the same. So you find your conversion factor and you analyze that number, and you either round it to 0.5 or to the next whole number. That is for ease of calculation and to ensure that you are going to get enough product. So rule of thumb, if you breach a whole number, if you're in between 0.01 and 0.49, I highly recommend just rounding up to that 0.5. Or if you are in between the 0.51 to 0.99, go ahead and round up to the next whole number. When you have your conversion factor, you multiply that to all of the ingredients in your recipe. This may require unit conversions, rounding, and making some judgment calls on how the ingredients scaled. This is where some cook knowledge comes in, and you just analyze the recipe to make sure that all the conversions actually make sense in the end. What you do not want to do, though, is change from volume to weight. So whatever unit of measure is being used, if it is volume or weight in the original recipe, please keep it the same. Yes. So our quick example here, we have a desired yield of 130 and our original yield is 12. So we plug in our new or desired, as I wrote here at the top, it's 130 divided by our original yield, which is 12. That gives us 10.83. And then, like I said, we need to either round to 0.5 or to the next whole number. So to ensure we have enough product, our conversion factor gets rounded up to 11. Our yield example here is taking this cookie recipe on the left-hand side and converting it to make sure I can yield 100 cookies. So we take 100 divided by 24, that is the new over the original yield, and our conversion factor ends up being 4.16, but to ensure that we have enough product, we are rounding up to 4.5. And then I'm taking this number and multiplying it to all of these ingredients on my left-hand side, and the conversions are over here on our right. Do note that I had to change teaspoons over here to tablespoon, and same with the salt, and that is because I 3 times 4.5 ends up being 13.5 teaspoons, and that's just not a very practical way of measuring out baking powder. And since I know that there are 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon, I was able to figure out how many tablespoons of baking powder I need to use. So you guys do have this little cheat sheet on the back of your guidelines to math equations decoded page. So please refer to that when you get to converting your recipes. And when we convert portion sizes, we are either scaling up or scaling down, but it is easier to scale up. And this is used to alter portion sizes and total yields. That equation looks like this. It is 2 steps, almost 3 actually. The first part of the equation is just figuring out the total yield and weight of both recipes that you are looking at. So you need to do this first part twice. You need to do it for the new recipe and the original recipe. You take the number of portions that it serves, the portion size, and that gives you the total yield and weight. And then you take those numbers, plug them into the equation that we just worked with, new over original, and that gives us a conversion factor. So the example here is a recipe that makes 10 5-ounce portions of chicken breast, but I need 50 3-ounce portions. So looking at that first step, I'm working out the problem for both the new and original recipe. The original is 10 portions of 5 ounces, and that is 50 ounces total. The new recipe is 50 portions of a 3-ounce, and that is 150 ounces total. So from there, just plug that information into our equation like we saw on the last slide. 150 divided by 50 gets us 3. That's a nice even number. I don't have to do anything with it. So there it is. This is kind of where we stopped at class. So this is price per unit. You might also see it written as purchase cost, APC. This is a really, really simple equation. I'm sure you guys already do this normally anyways, but there is an equation for it. So let's just cover that real fast. So it is our as purchase cost divided by the number of units in that case, and that is price per unit. This finds us the price of the individual unit, and you can use it when you're comparing prices between a single item and the bulk item. So a very simple example here. You can buy 1 roll of paper towel for $2.25, or you can buy a pack of 6 for $10.50. If I wanted to understand what the deal is here, I need to do this calculation. So very easily taking $10.50, dividing that by 6, and that gets me $1.75 per roll. And now I know that the pack is the better buy. Okay, so we're moving into a little more challenging applications. Yield percentage. This defines how much of a product is usable. And just know that the yield percentage is an estimate, but it is fairly accurate. Yield percentages are an estimate because the product that requires trim, no two are the same. So no 2 briskets are the same, no 2 carrots are going to be the same, no 2 potatoes are the same. There's always going to be a varying amount of waste coming from one product, but these numbers are done usually a few times to figure out a yield percentage, and then the average is taken from that. So you can perform yield tests on your own, or there are plenty of books that you can use as well. Also, Google helps out with a lot of this stuff now. So again, this is a 2-part equation. We have our first part. It's a very simple subtraction problem. We take quantity purchased minus the trim amount, and that is the edible portion. And edible portion, again, is all of the product that is able to be used to be cooked or to be eaten. From there, we take our edible portion, divide that by the quantity purchased. So again, this original number appears back into the second part, and that is what gets us our yield percentage. Example is I have 15 pounds of brisket that would be trimmed of 3 pounds, 3 ounces of fat. So we take our original quantity purchased, that is 15 pounds minus 3 pounds, 3 ounces, and that gets me to 11 pounds, 13 ounces. And I plug, this is my EP weight, I plug that back into the equation. And at this point, I see that I have multiple units of measure. I have pounds and ounces. So what I'm going to do is quickly convert all of this into ounces so it's a little easier to work with. I have 179 ounces divided by 240 ounces, which gets me 0.745. And then I'm just going to turn that into a percentage, and my yield is 75%. In order to calculate the edible portion, there again is two parts. So, in understanding how much edible part is in what was purchased, this is our equation. We have quantity purchased divided by the yield percentage, and that is our EP weight. And then we can calculate the amount of portions from the edible portion weight. So that is EP divided by portion size, and that gets us the number of portions. Don't worry, we have an example right now. Okay, so I have 10 pounds of asparagus. 4 ounces is served per person, and asparagus has a 56% yield. So plugging that into our first part of the equation on the left-hand side, quantity purchased divided by our yield percentage. I bought 10 pounds of asparagus. There's a 56% yield on that. I'm going to convert 10 pounds into ounces just because I'm eventually going to have to work with ounces when I get to the portion size. So to make it a little easier on myself, I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So 10 times 16 ounces is what got me to this 160 divided by 0.56, which is our yield just as a decimal. And that gives me an EP weight of 89.6 ounces. So that means from 160 ounces of asparagus, I actually only have 89.6. So that is, as the yield percentage shows, almost half. You lose almost half the asparagus because there's so much waste on it. So if I know that this is what I'm working with from 10 pounds, I need to know how many portions I can serve from that. So I take my EP weight, which is what we just found here, and we are dividing that by our portion size. So this is why we convert it into ounces. I plug in my 89.6 ounces divided by 4, and that brought me to 22.4 portions available. But since we don't have a complete portion here, we actually only have 22 portions available, but this answer is acceptable. If you wanted to calculate the edible portion costs, you might see that written as EPC. This is the equation you'd use for it. It is as purchase cost divided by yield percentage, and that is how much the edible portion cost itself. So I will explain this, don't worry. We use this when we need to understand how much the edible portion in a recipe actually costs. So this is something you would use when you are costing out a recipe to obtain a menu price. So for example, if you buy 3 pounds of carrots at $1.20 a pound and it has a 75% yield, this is what it's going to look like. We have 3 pounds times 100, $1.20 brings us to $3.60. That is our as purchased cost. That is the total amount of money we spent to buy that 3 pounds of carrots. So we take $3.60 divided by the 75% yield, and that brings us to $4.80. Now, to understand this, to compare to the price per pound that we originally paid, the $1.20, I just took 480 divided by 3 pounds here, and this is $1.60 per pound. So what this means is, oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know if you can hear, I have a little bird and he's running around on the keyboard. So what this means is when you have a product that requires trim, and if the recipe calls for 3 pounds, you actually have to buy more than 3 pounds to ensure that you have the 3 pounds for the recipe. So that's what this number eventually represents, is it compensates for the waste, the trim that you experience from the full product, and this is the amount of money that you should be plugging into your recipe when you go to cost for it. So This is probably a little, further down the line that you will need this. You won't need this for the menu project that you're working on right now, but it is something to be aware of. So again, ordering when considering trims. So it's kind of like what we were just talking about. What we were just talking about was more concerned with money, and this is more concerned with about the amount that you need to order in order to not have a shortage. So the example here is I need 20 portions of Brussels sprouts. Those are served in 6-ounce portions, and Brussels sprouts have a 74% yield. So the equation that we use here is our EP weight divided by our yield percentage, and that is the amount to order. So in order to figure out my EP weight, I know that I need 20 portions of 6 ounces of Brussels sprouts. So 20 times 6 is 120. I need 120 ounces of edible Brussels sprouts, not the trimmed part, or not the untrimmed, not how they are pictured here. I need them to be processed and ready to go, ready to eat. So plugging into our equation now, I take that 120 ounces divided by the yield percentage, that is 74, and that brings me to 162 ounces. So to understand this a little bit better for like an order guide, I'm going to convert this into pounds. So 162 ounces divided by 16 brings me to 10.125 pounds. So just keeping this at the nearest hundredth, there needs to be 10.13 pounds of Brussels sprouts ordered in order for me to make this 20 portions of 6 ounces. So I hope that makes sense. Like I said, this is probably a little further down the line for you guys, but it's something good for us to go over now and kind of get introduced to. And then here is the list of those acronyms. So I will also post this PowerPoint without my voice in case you guys don't need it or in case you're just sick of it. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, please let us know. Bye.